The first shot fired should have ended the fight. That was the assumption the Tarkathian warriors made when they opened fire on the human outpost. A precise, calculated strike, clean, efficient, overwhelming. By all their understanding of battle, it should have been over in moments. But then, the humans got back up. The first wave of plasma rounds tore through the perimeter defenses, sending explosions rippling across the outpost. Smoke and fire blanketed the area, and for a brief moment, the Tarkathians believed they had achieved total victory. They had seen countless species crumble under similar assaults, their warriors either vaporized or too injured to continue fighting. Yet, through the thick haze, figures emerged, humans, bloodied, burned, and still moving. They weren't retreating. They weren't surrendering. They were charging. Commander Excelvor of the Tarkathian warhost narrowed his many eyes in disbelief as his targeting systems confirmed what he was seeing. The humans had taken direct hits lethal by any standard. Some should have been dead, others too wounded to stand. And yet, they advanced, their weapons raised, their eyes burning with something the Tarkathians didn't fully understand. "Impossible," Excelvor muttered under his breath. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were fighting harder. Faster. More aggressively. What should have been the final blow had only made them more dangerous. A Tarkathian shock trooper, one of the largest, strongest warriors in their ranks, lunged forward, swinging a massive blade toward the closest human. The humans should have dodged or hesitated. Instead, they took the hit, absorbing the impact as if pain were nothing more than a distant inconvenience. And then, with a savage growl, they retaliated, driving their own weapon deep into the Tarkathian's chest. Selvor's mind raced. He had read reports about human endurance, their ability to push beyond normal limits. But this was something else. Their physiology wasn't the only factor at play. There was something in their spirit, something that made them refuse to stop. Injuries that should have crippled them only seemed to fuel their rage. Blood loss, broken bones, none of it mattered. They fought like beings who had no concept of limits, no understanding of when to fall. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Humans don't have an off switch. The battle should have been won. Now, it was something else entirely. Selvor watched as his forces faltered. For the first time, Tarkathian's seasoned warriors, conquerors of worlds, hesitated. Fear crept into their movements. And the humans saw it. One of them, face smeared with blood, his own or someone else's, Excelvor couldn't tell, locked eyes with him through the smoke. The human grinned, a grim, knowing expression that sent a shiver through Excelvor's core. Excelvor's claws tightened around the controls of his command console, his mind racing as he watched the battlefield shift in a way he had never seen before. His warriors, the elite of the Tarkathian warhost, were breaking formation. The humans weren't just surviving, they were overwhelming. This was not how battles were supposed to go. Not against a species still in the early stages of galactic warfare. Humans had no bioenhancements, no advanced shielding woven into their bodies, no tactical neural link that coordinated their every move. By all logic, they should have been predictable, fragile. But logic had failed him tonight. The humans weren't moving like soldiers following a rigid battle plan. They fought with something else, an instinct, a raw determination that made every attack unpredictable. They weren't just dodging and countering, they were adapting, improvising, turning every moment of pain into another reason to push forward. One of Excelvor's officers clicked his mandibles in distress. "Commander, our forces are falling back. They are disoriented." Disoriented? No, that wasn't the right word. They were afraid. Selvor had seen fear before. He had used it as a weapon against weaker species, watching their warriors crumble under the weight of hopelessness. But this was different. This was something his forces had never faced, a prey that refused to be hunted, that refused to acknowledge when it was beaten. A Tarkathian soldier screamed through the comms, his voice filled with something Selvor had never heard from his kind before. Desperation. They don't stop. The feed cut off, replaced by static. Selvor turned his many eyes back to the battlefield. His forces were trying to regroup, but every attempt to form a defensive line was shattered before it could take hold. Humans didn't press forward in predictable patterns. They attacked from unexpected angles, moved through smoke like wraiths, took hits that should have ended them, and kept fighting as if pain was nothing more than an afterthought. He zoomed in on one of the human warriors. Blood dripped from a deep wound in their side, staining their armor, yet they moved as if they didn't feel it. Their face was twisted in something terrifyingly alien to Excelvor. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to break their enemy. A new realization dawned on Excelvor, one colder than anything he had felt before. He had spent cycles studying battle strategies, dissecting war doctrines across the galaxy. But humans didn't fight for territory. They didn't fight for honor or conquest. They fought like creatures who had learned over thousands of years that survival meant ignoring the pain. That victory wasn't about strength alone. It was about refusing to fall no matter how hard the world tried to crush them. Zelvor's mandibles twitched as he issued a new command, his voice lower than before. "Pull back." His officers hesitated. "Now." But even as his forces began to retreat, Excelvor knew the truth. Humans didn't just endure. They pursued. As Excelvor's forces retreated, the humans didn't follow the usual pattern of a weakened enemy. They didn't rush in, guns blazing, expecting to seize an easy victory. Instead, they slowed their advance, almost deliberately. They spread out across the battlefield, no longer just soldiers, they were hunters now, tracking their prey with a quiet intensity that unnerved even the most battle-hardened Tarkathians. One of the Tarkathian scouts, barely a flicker on the edge of the human's field of vision, had been watching from a concealed position. His breath quickened as he saw a group of humans moving in synchrony, their eyes locked onto the retreating Tarkathians like wolves stalking their pack's next meal. He keyed into his communicator, but the message came out garbled, almost frantic. "They're organizing. They're..." The message was cut short, replaced by a horrible screech of static, followed by an eerie silence. The scout never finished his warning. The retreat was becoming chaotic. The Tarkathians had expected to regroup and rethink their strategy, but the humans wouldn't give them the time. They were relentless, their movements unpredictable, yet purposeful, like a storm with no center, no calm. And with each human warrior that fell, another seemed to rise in their place, seemingly stronger, more determined. On the command ship, Excelvor's sharp senses told him everything he needed to know. The humans were far from exhausted. If anything, they had become more focused, more unified. It was as if they were feeding off the chaos, thriving on the very destruction the Tarkathians had thought would break them. But this battle wasn't just about strategy anymore. It was something deeper, something primal. Selvor's thoughts turned back to the human he had seen earlier, the one with the bloodied face, the one who had locked eyes with him. There was something unsettling about the way that human had smiled, as if they knew the battle had already been won. On the ground, the human soldiers didn't stop. They continued their relentless pursuit, each step a declaration of defiance. They had no off switch. They had no limit. A Tarkathian warlord, his massive frame towering over the battlefield, turned to face a lone human soldier who had dared to approach. He grinned, ready to crush the smaller opponent. But instead of the expected fear, the human merely tilted their head, their face locked in quiet determination. The warlord swung his massive axe, a blow that would have cleaved any other enemy in half. But the human didn't dodge. They didn't even flinch. Instead, they stepped into the strike, their body taking the blow full force. The warlord's eyes widened in disbelief as the human's hand reached out, grabbing the haft of the weapon and twisting it from his grasp. The warlord roared in pain, and yet, even as his side bled, the human didn't retreat. They didn't stop coming. They were relentless. Back on the command ship, Excelvor stood still, his many eyes scanning the battlefield. He watched as his warriors fell one by one, not to superior firepower, not to clever tactics, but to something far harder to understand. The humans weren't just enduring, they were thriving in a way that defied logic. His officers were beginning to panic, their voices growing more frantic. "Commander, our forces are in disarray. We can't hold them off much longer." Selvor's gaze flickered toward the stars above them, toward the vast space beyond the battlefield. Was it possible the humans had been preparing for this moment for longer than anyone had imagined? What if they had known all along that a battle of this scale would come? What if, just perhaps, the humans weren't the ones who needed to adapt? What if they were the ones doing the adapting? A sharp crackle broke through his thoughts. "Commander, we have incoming." Selvor didn't need to ask what that meant. The humans were closing in. There would be no retreat now. His warriors were out of time, out of options. And yet, in that moment, Exelvor felt a flicker of something he had never experienced before: fear. The Tarkathian warlord staggered back, his armor scorched, his mind racing. He had fought countless battles, seen armies collapse in a matter of moments, but nothing had prepared him for what the humans were doing. Their tenacity was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Every time they were pushed back, they came harder. Every time they were broken, they rebuilt themselves. Exelvor paced anxiously on his command deck, his mind grappling with the unexpected reality unfolding below. His warriors, normally so precise, so disciplined, were in disarray. The humans had disrupted their lines, their formations, turning the battlefield into a brutal, chaotic melee. The Tarkathians' strength, their overwhelming numbers, meant nothing against opponents who didn't know when to quit. And worse, those humans were beginning to understand the nature of their enemy, adapting faster than the Tarkathians could keep up. Selvor could hear the frantic reports flooding in from the front lines. His forces were falling back, the human counterattacks relentless, precise. They were pushing harder, deeper, closing in with a terrifying efficiency that made the commander's heart race with an unfamiliar feeling: panic. The human who had stared him down earlier, Exelvor, couldn't shake the memory of those cold, defiant eyes had been at the center of the chaos. Every time the Tarkathians thought they had neutralized the threat, another human would rise, bloodied but unbroken, to take their place. It was as if they couldn't be stopped. The tension on the battlefield grew thick as the Tarkathians regrouped. The humans had taken ground they should never have been able to. Selvor's officers were making desperate requests for reinforcements, but the commander's thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake the realization that this battle had become something more than just a fight for victory. It was a fight for survival. On the ground, the humans were no longer just soldiers, they were a force of nature. The Tarkathians, once so confident in their overwhelming power, were now struggling to hold on to their positions. The humans had taken the war to a new level. They fought like beasts, like creatures with nothing to lose. They did not fear death. They had no concept of surrender. In the distance, Exelvor saw a human figure moving through the smoke, their silhouette unmistakable. It was the same warrior, the one who had survived everything, who had looked at him with that smile that sent a chill down his spine. This human had become a symbol of everything the Tarkathians were failing to comprehend. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The human moved with purpose, with a predatory grace, their steps precise, deliberate. Zelvor's breath caught as he watched the warrior close the distance between them. He could feel the tension building, his every instinct telling him to flee, to regroup, to fight another day. But the humans wouldn't let him. They were closing in. From his position on the command ship, Exelvor issued a final order to his forces: fall back to the secondary staging grounds. We cannot afford another direct confrontation. But the words barely left his mouth when the ground beneath him trembled. He looked out of the viewing port and saw the horizon glowing with an unnatural light. It wasn't the usual flare of energy weapons or explosions. This was something different. The humans had set a trap. Zelvor's mandibles clicked in alarm as the realization hit. The light wasn't just an attack. It was a signal that they were preparing for something bigger, something far more devastating than he had ever anticipated. And just as the last of his forces began to retreat, the sky above erupted with a deafening roar. The Tarkathians had no more time to run. They were too far from the extraction zone, too far from safety. The humans had cornered them. Selvor felt his heart race as he turned toward the view screen. The humans weren't just fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to break them. The true nature of this battle was becoming clear, and Excelvor knew they had no way out. The ground shook beneath Excelvor's feet as the humans unleashed the final phase of their attack. The sky above, once filled with the distant glow of retreating Tarkathian warships, now blazed with the ferocity of a battle-worn species who refused to yield. For the first time in his life, Excelvor felt a sinking realization that no matter how strong his warriors were, no matter how advanced their weapons, they were simply no match for the human spirit. The human soldier, the one who had become a symbol of their defiance, stepped forward through the rising smoke. Their face was a grim mask of determination, but there was no victory in their eyes. This wasn't about winning, it was about survival, about showing the Tarkathians that no matter how many times humanity was pushed down, it would rise again. They weren't just fighting to defend their planet or their species. They were fighting for a future, for the right to exist in a galaxy that had forgotten the strength of humanity's will. Selvor's officers watched in stunned silence as their lines continued to break. He had ordered a retreat, but the human forces had anticipated every move, cutting off their escape routes, encircling them like wolves closing in on their prey. The Tarkathians were trapped. With each passing moment, the humans seemed to grow stronger, more resolute. They weren't just attacking with weapons, they were attacking with everything they had learned in their centuries of hardship, their history of struggle, and their unyielding refusal to give up. This was a battle they couldn't lose, not because they had superior technology, but because they had something the Tarkathians lacked, the will to fight through every hardship and the drive to never stop, no matter the cost. Selvor's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the truth. He had underestimated humanity in every possible way. They weren't just warriors, they were survivors. And their ability to adapt, to learn, to fight back when the odds seemed insurmountable was a force that even his most seasoned generals couldn't comprehend. In the final moments of the battle, as the Tarkathian lines crumbled and their forces scattered in disarray, Excelvor knew it was over. The humans had won not just the battle, but the war. The message had been clear. The Tarkathians had invaded expecting an easy conquest, a species that would fold under pressure. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous, a species that refused to surrender, that fought not just to survive, but to make a statement. The last Tarkathian warship, now heavily damaged, limped into space, its escape futile. The humans had already claimed victory on the ground, and their forces would follow. Zelvar could do nothing but watch as his people fled the planet, their power shattered, their empire broken. And yet, even as his forces retreated, he couldn't help but wonder what would come next. Could the Tarkathians ever truly understand the depth of humanity's resolve? Could they ever comprehend what had made this species so unyielding? As the last remnants of the Tarkathian fleet disappeared into the vastness of space, the human soldier, bloodied but unbowed, stood tall amidst the ruins of the battlefield. Their eyes scanned the horizon, not in triumph, but in quiet reflection, as if they knew the battle was just the beginning. Zelvor, for the first time in his life, felt a strange sense of respect for the species he had once believed so weak. He had learned something valuable, something profound, about humanity's place in the galaxy. And as the stars blinked overhead, he realized that the true power of humanity wasn't just in their technology or their ability to fight. It was in their refusal to ever stop fighting, no matter the odds. And that, Excelvor knew, was a force no empire could ever defeat.